We only have one more of these after tonight. So this is kind of crucial, folks. Here we go. College football playoff rankings reveal right now on ESPN. We will follow along here, the voice of college football. And of course, take your comments and questions, take your phone calls as well. And of course, we're having some kind of issue with the connection here, and I can't get the show in front of me. I don't have a TV in the room, and my Spectrum site channel guide is showing an error. So there we go. So I'm just going to have to depend on you to tell me the rankings from 25 all the way up to number one. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all being here as always. You know that. Without you, we don't have a show. We don't have a channel. We don't have 15 channels. Can't wait to see what transpires tonight. So again, I'll be looking forward to the chat here. I'm reliant on you. Again, unable to complete requests. Well, the request is I'm paying you $190 a month for cable and everything else. So the request is I got to be able to see this crap. So that's the request. All right. So I will leave it up to you to let me know. Otherwise, I would have set up in front of a television. All right. Regardless, we will get the top 25. Of course, it's the only 8 or 9 top spots that matter. Iowa side, Iowa down there at 14 or whatever they're going to be, could still factor into all this potentially. But truly, it's the top 8 that really matter at this point. So we will check it out and we will be able to get a pretty good beat on what the committee thinks of Ohio State's loss to Michigan, Michigan's win over Ohio State, possibly vaulting the Wolverines to number 1, and Alabama's near scare. Well, let's not call it a near scare. It's a near miss. It was a scare for Alabama. And if the committee is going to be fair and just, Alabama should take a bit of a hit. That doesn't mean they drop in the rankings, but the evaluation of Alabama should drop after last weekend. Just like Washington, I am not necessarily saying Washington should drop in the rankings. So understand there's a difference that you can win or lose, but most likely win an unimpressive game against a middling team, and the evaluation should change. The evaluation of that team that won the game barely over a mediocre team, the evaluation of that team should drop, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to drop in the rankings because they may have been clearly a team that should be ranked ahead of the teams that they're ranked ahead of. Texas, Alabama, perfect example there, as Texas has struggled against the likes of Kansas State, Houston, TCU, but maintained their position as they should have above Alabama because they continued to win and they own the head-to-head. I got to think at this point, let's try it again, refresh. Got to think at this point that we are fairly deep into the top 25. Let's see what we've got here. What do you guys have? Anybody keeping me up on the top 25? No, no one is. All right. I'll just wait till the complete rankings come out. I see Mike says Iowa's at 12. Christopher has Liberty at 10. All right, great. And look at this. Thing's been doing that for like 20 minutes. While we're waiting, we will leave the link to call the show in the chat. And I will do the same in the description section of the video. So until I see some rankings, I don't have a whole lot to say, but I'm going to have to say something because I think you're all watching for a reason here. Okay, yeah. Is Georgia still number one over Michigan, or does Michigan climb all the way to number one past Georgia? Georgia's result against Georgia Tech is pretty inconsequential. They showed to be the better team by far. Georgia Tech's not a good team. They're a 6-win team, and Georgia took care of business, did not look overly impressive. I think it's more about treating the Michigan win over Ohio State, arguably the best win in college football this season. I think most people say the Texas win over Alabama because Alabama was playing at home, but you could argue that Michigan's win on Saturday is the best win in college football this season. Now, they did do it at home, and it was close. So I don't know if that's going to be enough. That was enough for me in my rankings to lift Michigan to number one. Then also there's the case of Washington. Washington barely escaped Washington State. That's an ugly, ugly performance, and it's not an aberration. It is, once again, Washington can barely win against a marginal team. So that too is a problem. The other considerations, of course, Florida State's quarterback situation. Jordan Travis is not there, and they struggled in their first game without Jordan Travis against, again, a marginal team. Got Mike Fort here. Mike, appreciate you being here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Looks like I've got somebody messing around in the background. I got to change some colors here. We'll work on while you talk.
Oh, what's going on?
Not too much.
See, somebody messing with your StreamYard or something?
Yeah, a little bit. We've got multiple shows going on.
Yeah, I know that the Big 12 is up.
Yes, the Big 12 is up. So what's on your mind?
I guess I don't know what they're seeing in Georgia. Maybe they think that Ole Miss win is a lot better, and maybe the Missouri win is a lot better than it should be.
Well, I wrestled back and forth with Michigan and Georgia. Georgia's played and won more decidedly against better competition overall. Now, Michigan's got 2 wins that can be argued to be better, but if you go deeper than that, then you're quickly going to find Georgia with better wins after that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, Missouri was pretty close. They did wipe the floor with Ole Miss. I think the difference I give them, neither one of them has a good out-of-conference schedule. I give us a little bit of an advantage over, top wins. But the main thing I dock Georgia for is they've had some close calls against some less than stellar teams. Our big bugaboo was, when we went to Maryland, which we've, not looked good well. They didn't exactly blow the doors off Georgia Tech. Auburn was hanging with them deep in the fourth quarter. South Carolina wasn't going away, and they're terrible. So, I look at some of these, games, that on paper Georgia should be winning by 35, 40 points, and they're skating by with, 1 and maybe two score wins.
They should be beating South Carolina and some of the other teams you mentioned by 35 or 40 points.
South Carolina, aren't they like 3-9 or something, or 4-8? I think.
Well, they're 5-7.
Oh, 5-7.
Yeah.
I know they're down this year. It's kind of said a lot. They opened up the season. North Carolina beat them, which didn't look that bad early on, because North Carolina was projected to be a good team, but looks like North Carolina's not. South Carolina that's a team they should be beating by more than 10.
Oh, of course they should. Yeah, but again, Georgia's beaten more quality teams than Michigan. Michigan's highest game should be ranked above anybody else. Now, the Penn State, Missouri, Ole Miss, how you rank those games, we could argue that all night. Ohio State's the best win between the two teams. There's no doubt. After that, maybe Georgia's got the next 2 wins. Maybe Penn State's there. Again, that's very arguable between 3 10-2 teams. And then after that, really Michigan's they've got 7-5 Maryland.
Yeah, 6-6
And
Rutgers.
And 6-6 Rutgers. Well, Georgia's got 8-4 Tennessee. They've got 6-6 Auburn. They've got, and so that's 4 deep. Who am I forgetting? Anybody? So they got Ole Miss, Mizzou, Auburn, and whoever we just said, Tennessee, and Kentucky. 7-5 Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky.
So it's a deeper win total if you're looking at bowl teams. Again, argue that against top end wins, and Michigan's got it.
Yeah, I tend to dock Georgia because all of our cupcakes until Maryland we just beat out of the water, whereas Georgia didn't. I think to me that means something. I mean, is beating Minnesota impressive? No. Is beating Minnesota 52-10 in Minneapolis impressive? Yeah, I'd give you that. Whereas a 7-point game in Auburn, not impressive. Beating South Carolina by 10 in Athens, not impressive. So I just kind of see it as a kind of a whole. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Certainly,
anyway.
Michigan. Sorry to cut you off, because we could go back and forth and look at my rankings. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I've got Michigan 1, Georgia 2 as well. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that there's a case for Georgia. Michigan hasn't beaten a team like Ole Miss as badly as Georgia did. I don't know if they've beaten a team as good as Kentucky as bad as Georgia did.
Yeah, they did kind of run up the score on those 2 teams. And I think, I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter because if, Georgia beats Alabama next week, it doesn't matter what we do at Iowa. They'd be back to number 1 anyways.
All right. We've got the rankings in. Very good. We'll post those here in just a second.
See, and there's Georgia has 5 playoff wins. Okay, yeah, that's great. This is 2023.
Yeah, this is 2023. So, yeah, do we have somebody saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole business about they're the 2-time defending champions and they've earned this and they've earned that. No, what they earned was that playoff spot that afforded them the opportunity to win that national championship game. We start back at 0-0. Yes, means nothing. Yeah. Now, if that means somebody to somebody's personal respect or personal perspective on the program, absolutely. I'm one of those people. I have a lot of faith in Kirby Smart, the coaching staff, the players, because they've proven it. Yes, I will treat Georgia differently predicting football games in the playoffs if they make it because of what they've done in the past. But that should have nothing to do with where they're ranked in the playoffs or seeded if they make the playoffs. Nothing.
Right. I just go by what these last 12 games say.
Otherwise, we would have said TCU, great season last year. You were 5-7 last year. You're not making the playoffs.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what I've got issue with here. Do you have anything else, Mike?
I think that's the top 8 look like what I would have had. I would have had Ohio State at 6. I probably could make a case for them at 5 because I was stumping for Oregon a good chunk of the year, but like I said, a lot of their good wins, especially in the Pac, seem to have kind of lost some measure. I thought their Utah win. They dominated Utah, and that's not turning out to be that great of a win, especially after what Arizona did to them. The only thing I really give Oregon the benefit of the doubt is they only had one of what I would really call a struggle win is when they went down to Lubbock and turns out Texas Tech isn't bad because Texas just beat the absolute snot out of them. So really the Texas Tech game is the only knock I'd give on Oregon. but I think that their top wins don't compare to Ohio State's wins, and I think their loss is worse than Ohio State's loss. So I consider Oregon and Ohio State kind of 5 and 5A, but I mean, if somebody wanted to make a case for either one at 5, I don't think I could put up a big argument against it.
Okay, Mike. Anything else?
No, just kind of surprised that we only got 10 AP votes. That's upsetting. Oh well.
Does it matter?
No, it don't. But I just it's the ego thing. We all got it. Anyways, thanks for having me on, Mark.
I appreciate it, Mike. Have a
Have
good one. All right. I want to give these a look before we take any other calls. So, Georgia, Michigan, we've sized that up. I've got Michigan at number 1, but I certainly, as I just explained to Mike, understand the Georgia argument. Hopefully it's not based on previous seasons. I can guarantee you that it somewhat is, because those are 13 humans. And we're going to go over the playoff committee because I've been asked about that in previous weeks, and I did not have that information in front of me of who's serving on the playoff committee. So we'll go down that here in a few minutes. But Georgia 1, Michigan 2, I'm fine with, even though I've got Michigan 1. I think beating Ohio State is arguably the best win in the country. Arguably, didn't say that it was. Some would say Alabama's still the best win in the country because it was on the road and it was 2 scores as opposed to winning a game that went down to the final drive at home. It all depends on how you rate Ohio State versus Alabama. I think it's arguably the best win in the country, just like the Washington win over Oregon could be ranked as the best win in the country. Those are the 3 that stand out off the top of my head right now. It's the 3 best wins in the country. Oklahoma, Texas, of course, that's a good one too. All right, Washington, I'm okay with them being number 3. That's where I've got them. But I got to say, I thought long and hard about keeping Ohio State, despite losing, ahead of Washington and Florida State. Not just because I think they're better. That's not how I do my rankings, but I still believe that they've got a better resume, especially if you look at performance, than Washington and Florida State. Washington has been like a 6-6 football team the last 5 or 6 weeks. Like, I'm not saying they've been a 9-win looking football team. They've been a 6 or 7-win looking football team for a considerable amount of time now. Everybody's going to have their letdown game. Everybody's going to struggle against somebody who's marginal. That is the history of the college football playoff. And before that, teams that compete for national championships typically have 1 or 2 games that they either lose to a fairly marginal team or trip up against somebody or just look sloppy. But it's repeated with Washington. They haven't looked good since they stepped off the field against Oregon. Florida State, somewhat similar. They haven't looked that impressive for a while. Duke was a struggle. Florida was a struggle. Boston College was a struggle. Clemson, I give a lot of respect for that game. I still think Clemson's a quality team, but that was an overtime game in which they got outplayed. So again, I thought long and hard about keeping Ohio State at number 3. However, I was just going to honor the other 2 teams winning and honor the win-loss record. So that's what I did. Now, Oregon, Ohio State, I don't get that. Don't get it. I think it's a complete recency bias of Ohio State losing last weekend. Absolutely, because the chasm between Georgia and Michigan and everyone else, or at least the other 2 undefeated teams, I'll say that, actually hit the chasms over the other 2 undefeated teams and not over Oregon and Ohio State or Texas, Alabama, is fairly wide until proven otherwise in my eyes. And so Ohio State going to Michigan and playing the game that they did this past Saturday versus Oregon against Washington. And then Oregon doesn't have, I don't think Penn State and Notre Dame wins. I know the Arizona win looks good. They're a good team at 9-3. Oregon State 8-4. Utah 8-4. They've got a stack of decent wins. and USC 7-5. So they've got a 9-3 win, 2 8-4 wins, and a 7-5 win. Ohio State's got a 10-2 win, a 9-3 win, and then a few 7-5 wins, 2 7-5 wins. So, and Ohio State didn't have a game like going to Lubbock, Texas, and I think that gets lost. I think people see the score and they see 38-30 and they see, okay, well, that's a one-score game technically, but they would have had to score a touchdown, Texas Tech, and get the 2-point conversion, and they were playing at home. And did you watch the game? Texas Tech outplayed Oregon, and Oregon needed a questionable call in the end zone on an interception that would have ended the game, to then have another chance to take the lead 31-30 on a field goal. Then they got a pick six on the last play of the game that widened the margin. 31-30 might shake people up a little bit more than 38-30. Texas, Alabama, I got to hold to Texas winning the head-to-head. That's all there is to it. So it's almost like regardless of what these two teams do, as long as they're winning and how they do it and to what degree of dominance versus whoever, it doesn't matter. And that's going to be a really difficult situation if Alabama beats Georgia and Texas beats Oklahoma State, because those two wins aren't comparable. Then anything past that is, just window dressing, just for ranking's sake, other than Iowa has gone up one spot and there is a crazy conceivable way to at least put them in the discussion if they win the Big Ten championship. So your only teams that can make your only real teams that are in the deal right now would be really Ohio State's got a long shot. It's really 1-5, 7 and 8. And then your long shots are Ohio State at 6 and Iowa at whatever they are, 17. 16. I've got them at 14. All right, let's go to the phones. Appreciate you guys waiting. Landon's here. Landon, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing just fine. Appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for letting me in. I got a couple things I can
Sure.
hopefully contribute to the show and make it entertaining here. The first thing is just talking about from an outside perspective, not really emotionally connected to the game. Do you really buy into the idea? We kept hearing over and over again this statistic between Ohio State and Michigan that the team that ran the ball the best has won whatever 20 some years in a row.
Yeah.
I was thinking, is watching the game, to me, it's completely irrelevant. If Ohio State can generate 500 yards and 470 of them are passing, what does it matter how you get the yards? You're going to win the game. Do you feel like Ryan Day was feeling pressure from that stat that he, quote, had to establish the running game? When if you've got, according to many analysts, the best receiving core in the nation, why not just utilize and implement that? Why do you feel burdened to feel like you have to run the football if you can just get the yards any way, by any means necessary?
Well, I don't think it's completely about how many rushing yards you get. This is what I think it is. Number one, let's understand that stat is going to be broken next year, in 5 years, sometime. It's not going to continue, but it is meaningful, and I believe that it's showing us something. But it's not showing us as much in 2023 as it did 20 years ago. It meant more 20 years ago than it does today, because there was more of a reliance on the running game 20 years ago than there is today. I get your point about 470 and 30. You would be hard pressed though to find a box score of a team winning a game throwing for four. And I know you're throwing those numbers way out of whack, but still anything close to that. The team that rushes for more yardage wins almost every game, more so than the passing yardage, for two different reasons. The team that's behind has to throw the ball, and so they're going to rack up passing yards, and the team that's in the lead runs the ball more so. And again, that's another stat that's losing its traction, because teams can be up by 2 scores in the second half more so and will throw the football more than they did in the past. But it also gives evidence of who's controlling the line of scrimmage and who's the more physically dominant team.
Oh.
But yeah, if your team runs for 100 yards on 20 carries at 5 yards per carry, and my team runs for 110 yards and it takes us 40 attempts, you've more effectively rushed the ball.
Yeah. I guess I was just troubled by, if you have an advantage at a particular point and it seems like your wide receiver core lining up against their secondary is going to be an advantage, that's what you exploit. And, you don't have to focus so hard on, man, we really have to rush for more yards than them. I just give me the yards however you give them to me. And if I got all these pretty little, toys out here that can give me all these yards, let me put the ball in their hand and let it make it happen, man. Let Marvis and Harrison have 200, like Devontae Smith in the national championship game. Let him have 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. And you're going to win the game, man.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm guessing, well, I watched the game, of course, that Alabama also was able to run the ball. So I agree with certain aspects of what you say, but not completely, because I do think that, again, almost 100% of the time, a team has to be balanced to have an effective offensive showing. You can find very few, especially on the pass side. You can find it more on the run side. You can find it more Michigan running the ball 32 consecutive times and dominating Penn State up front. I don't know if they dominated them up front. They controlled the game because they ran the ball well enough 32 straight times and only threw it 8 that they won that game. You were going to find more teams that were dominant running the ball versus having dismal passing efforts that still won the game versus the other way around.
Yeah. Okay.
But what you had to say about, and if I had the exhaustive research in front of me, believe me, I could prove that. I've looked at it. But the point that you're making about, did that affect Ryan Day's play calling? If that affected Ryan Day's play calling, then there's a serious problem. Ryan Day should care nothing about any of that, proving anything. Just prove to have the better team because you've got one more point on the scoreboard. I hope that had nothing to do with it. And I did think that he put Kyle McCord at a disadvantage a number of times by run on first down, run on second down. Oh, it's 3rd and 9. Now you got to throw. They're going to tee off on him. They're coming. I think he did that way too often.
Okay, buddy. Yeah, no, I was wanting that perspective. Again, as an outsider, and Exhibit A, Auburn ran the ball down Alabama's throat and didn't win the game. They had, I think, almost 100 more yards rushing than Alabama did, and it didn't equate a victory in that scenario.
You understand, if they defend 4th and 31, they do win the game.
that was still unbelievable. Yeah. I just want to hit on a couple points on what the committee's doing and looking at the rankings that they have, the criteria with it is difficult to go strength of schedule over strength of record. But the way that they separate the things, it's wins over ranked opponents and wins over teams, Division I and Power 5 teams. Those are even 2 separate categories themselves with winning records. And then on top of that is the team talent composite of each of the schools. And it is interesting between the Oregon and the Ohio State issue, because if you look at offensive and defensive efficiency numbers, Oregon's number 2 team in the nation in scoring offense efficiency, and they're 7th on defense. Ohio State's actually 32nd in the nation offensively, but they're 2nd in defense. And it could be, and if you look at the strength of record, Ohio State has 2 ranked wins, Oregon has 1, and Ohio State has beaten 4 teams, Power 5 with winning record, and Oregon's beaten 3. So a little bit of an edge on strength of record for Ohio State. But in the team talent composite, Ohio State, according to 24/7, is 3rd in the nation, Oregon's 10th. So there's a couple statistical edges that Ohio State had in terms of, the criteria that they do utilize. So, yeah, it is interesting that they had dropped them there, other than how the last statistic, which would be scoring margin. And at that point, Oregon edges out. Like, their scoring margin is greater than what Ohio State's done, meaning they've beat their opponents worse than Ohio State has. And maybe that's what gave them the edge, is how they seem to have looked dominant over the last couple, games since the loss to Washington.
Yeah. I in no way wanted to say that it was a slam dunk of a call for Ohio State, but I do think that they've got better wins and a better resume than Oregon.
Yeah. I mean, it could. Like I said, you had a couple stats favoring Ohio State, a couple favoring Oregon. It could have went, in either direction. Yeah. I do want to make a point on the Alabama-Texas thing.
I was going to say, I apologize because I had about 52 things in my head while you were saying all that, and then they all were gone. I was trying to figure out what am I going to say because I've got about 50 things I want to say, but keep going.
No. Well, and I want to hit on the Texas-Alabama thing real quick, and I'd be curious on your take. I in my mind, there is a way that you can sort of null a good victory, meaning Texas has an impressive victory, not taking anything away from it. But if you take in other factors of their strength of record, of their scoring efficiency, offensive, defensively, overall resume, I think there is a way Alabama can surpass Texas with all the other factors laying on the line. Like, they needed to beat Oklahoma. That loss to Oklahoma actually pulled them a step back. And the rest of the way that they have played, it's not that difficult to see if Alabama pulls an upset over Georgia, which could be considered the new best victory in all of college football. And Texas just beats a 9-3 Oklahoma State team that probably won't be ranked anymore after that game. Maybe they will be. There's enough on Alabama's resume and within their numbers that they could legitimately pass the team that beat them in week 2. There is a path where that can happen, and it would be legitimate.
Well, it depends on what you consider legitimate. So to me, yes, I understand what you're saying, that if you take the entirety of the season and you match up the two teams, yes. And it's all, you're giving us objective metrics, but how you use those metrics and which metrics you favor and how you put all that together is definitely subjective. So I do agree with the people, and I start here that Texas won a game against Alabama, and if they're both 12-1 conference champions, they won a game on the road in Tuscaloosa by 2 scores. And if that game isn't going to count, I just have difficulty with why we're playing football games.
Well, there's a difference between it counting and it settling the score and that being the only thing. As I said, you can have one team is allowed to improve and show their improvement by how they played the rest of the year. And the other team, for example, Texas, can show that they never really did as much with that victory. That it's not a matter of the game doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't mean everything by the same token. That the other factors can weigh into it to where, okay, maybe we do need to reevaluate. Alabama has shown steady improvement where Texas kind of really hasn't gotten much better over the year. And a win over Georgia could really solidify the fact that, man, these guys are playing like a championship team. They go on a neutral field.
Did they play like a championship team against Auburn?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want to do with Auburn. At home.
No. We can do about anything. And Landon, you bring up, I love the conversation. You bring up a lot of great points, and it's all legit, and you're very knowledgeable, and I appreciate all this. But however you slice that Auburn game, other than it's a rivalry and it's always close, well, that's not true. They played a pretty lousy Auburn team.
Well, but here's the thing, Mark. Think of this. According to 24/7 Sports, the 2 most talented rosters in football are Alabama and Georgia, respectively 1 and 2. Ohio State's 3rd. Okay? And according to CFB Matrix, the most talented team wins over 70% of the time. So that means 30% of it's about coaching. The 2 best rosters in football, Auburn lost at home by less than 10 points. So I think you just look at Auburn isn't an untalented team. I think they just had a brand new coach this year and was trying to make some pieces work, and at home is pretty dangerous.
If we're
Now,
going
I'm
to
not
make
trying to elevate Auburn more than what it is by any stretch. However, I don't need to diminish it more than what they are either. That's still a very talented roster and dangerous at home. Now, does that do anything to say where Texas struggled against TCU, right? What do you do with that game? You know, TCU, I don't think would be on the level of Auburn, at least talent-wise, or anything at that level. So we can, you can run through the schedules and somewhat nitpick, but it seems like the way Alabama hit their schedule with LSU, Mississippi. I know Tennessee fell out of ranking. They were ranked at one point in time.
Oh, they're still ranked unbelievably right now. They shouldn't be. That is probably the biggest joke in these rankings, Tennessee.
As an 8-4. Well, yeah, there's several 8-4 teams I think that are ranked, aren't there?
And Tennessee's at 21. And
Yeah.
Landon, this is what bothers me.
Okay.
The whole ranked versus unranked.
Okay.
Because for one thing, there is a number 26 team. Now, we know in the AP poll and the coaches poll, there's like 40 teams that actually are ranked. They're just not listed. They just don't choose not to put it, but there's nothing different. Like if we look at the AP or the coaches poll, there's absolutely nothing different about the process of ranking the first 25 teams versus the other teams receiving votes. They received votes just like the teams above them. They should put a number right next to their name. Actually, I think every team in the country should be ranked. Therefore, we get away from this whole they're ranked, they're not ranked, when the team that we're citing as a ranked team could be number 23 and the other team could be just barely off the map. And maybe they're actually better than the number 23 team. Utah is not in this top 25. They're in my top 25. I believe they've had a better season than Tennessee. So, yeah, when we go to ranked teams, I'm not going to say it doesn't mean anything because, of course, you have to be ranked or you have to be decent. You have to be at least an 8-4 team to be ranked. But it doesn't mean that there aren't teams that aren't ranked that are just as good as teams that are ranked. Liberty.
It turns into a shorthand for the caliber, I suppose. What's the difference between a 25th and a 26th ranked team? I mean, correct. I mean, nothing substantial. It is just a shorthand way of trying to evaluate. To evaluate the teams. Yeah.
Hopefully, Landon, that committee is talking about those games, and there is discussion that, okay, well, Oregon beat Utah by 4 scores. We know that we did not arrive with Utah as one of our 25 best teams, but they were one of the next 3. So does that really matter? And I'm sure that there are people within the room. We know that this is not a consensus top 25 out of this committee. There's all sorts of, I hope there better be all sorts of debate and conflict about who's ranked where.
Yeah. And there is, to my understanding of how it works. And then this cumulative is based on where the committee members have placed their votes. And this is kind of what we're looking at. There may have been a committee member that had Michigan number 1, perhaps, but the bulk of the 13 said that Georgia's the best team in the country. And that's where they put them. It's my understanding that is how it works. I just wanted to touch on a little bit the Alabama-Texas issue because the narrative and the on-field performance and I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything at all. I just kind of want to defend the notion that there is a probable scenario where even though a team lost in the regular season to an opponent, they have an ability to surpass them with other circumstances and the way that they played and things of that nature. And it wouldn't be that offhanded that there shouldn't be so much outrage or, oh my goodness, what are they thinking? Don't the games matter? Well, yeah, they do, but it's not there's a lot of other factors as well. And if they consider them, it's very possible for, like I said, Texas to kind of null a very good victory by playing poorly and losing the team that they shouldn't have in Oklahoma and, not really having a very strong schedule to kind of maintain it and dominating some of the teams that they should have. So, it would be viable in my opinion. That's all.
Well, there's no question that the best team doesn't always win every game.
Mm.
Now, what if Ohio State had a much better resume than Michigan outside of that game,
Yeah.
but they had the same record, like you're talking about with Texas and Alabama? Do you think that the committee would have the gall to say, "Oh, well, Ohio State's and they lost on the road. They actually lost on the road
Right.
in a closer game than Texas, Alabama. We're still going to rank Ohio State above Michigan." But they won't do that because they're in the same conference. But they should, based on what you're bringing to the table. I'm not saying they should, but I'm saying it's feasible to do that if they're taking that same approach.
There is a scenario where that's possible. Well, and I think, again, this is where, in my opinion, the committee, in the final form at least, not defending every single ranking they've ever put out as the season's moved on, but I think of the 2016 example where the committee did put Ohio State in over Penn State, and they should have. I think that was the right decision.
Well, they had a better record, too.
Well, they didn't have more victories, but they had less losses.
Well, they had a better record. That's a better record.
Yeah, the percentage-wise, yeah.
Yeah, if you're 11-1, that's better than 11-2.
Than 11-2, yeah. Yeah. And the way that the conference chose who should play for their conference championship, the way that worked, Penn State got that 13th data point. So I guess that's not an apples-to-apples comparison exactly, but that was the right decision.
And Penn State's out-of-conference game was a loss to Pitt, a marginal team. Ohio State went on the road and beat Oklahoma.
Yeah, convincingly.
And also had an out-of-division game and beat Wisconsin in a game that was Penn State's Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
So they had a decidedly better, I shouldn't say much better schedule. They had a decidedly better schedule.
But I mean, I guess that would be an example where I would say, that all other things being equal, Ohio State would have proven, because they only lost on the road by 3. Vegas gives you 3 points just for being at home. So that was a pretty even kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I can sit here and say, honestly, that there could be a scenario where a head-to-head gets annulled, where like Penn State didn't take advantage of that victory the way they should have. And they got crushed by Michigan that year, if I'm not mistaken, like a 49-7 or 42-7 or 10 or something or other. Like, they just didn't take advantage of that, man. It was a great win, but they should have done more to take advantage of it. So, yeah, that's it. I just wanted to kind of hedge off the outrage that may happen, that I would defend the committee if they chose Alabama over Texas, if it plays out that way. I don't think it will. I think Georgia's going to win, and this is all for nothing. But, be that as it may. Just wanted some feedback on that, buddy. See what you think.
I appreciate that, Landon. Good stuff.
Appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks for the call. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. There you see Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Florida State 4, Oregon, Texas, Alabama very much in the mix. Matthew Miller's here. Matthew, what's going on tonight?
Mark, I thought I was going to have to jump on here and just talk Oklahoma State. Then I saw these rankings. Then I get that last caller. Oh, my God. Okay, well, let's just dive deep. Why in the hell is Oregon ranked number 5? Why in the hell?
Well, you're looking at the Texas aspect of that. I'm looking at the Ohio State aspect.
I'm looking at both. I'm looking at Alabama. I think Oregon should be ranked 8th based on everything. I hear this thing called eye test. And you know what's subjective about that? Your eyes. You know what's not subjective about playing football? The scoreboard. That tells you right there what the score was at the end of games and stuff like that. Texas, okay, you're going to respond to that.
Yeah, I want to ask you, do you do rankings? Or do you just respond to these rankings?
I respond to these rankings.
Okay. What was your evaluation last week before this week's games about Oregon, Texas, Alabama?
Same thing.
Okay. All right.
Exact same
thing. So nothing changed this weekend. Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
Because I think I was on here and I complained before. I complained about that, and I complained about Tennessee, which, again, why the hell they're ranked is unbelievable.
Solidly ranked, by the way.
Yeah. Hell, if they won one more game, they might be a top 10 team. But it's just insane to me that Oregon, Texas has a better strength of record, strength of schedule, and a better overall win, and yet they are ranked behind Oregon.
If we took a collection of what we would consider, if we ranked Oregon's wins and Texas's wins, and the final 3 or 4, 5 don't much matter. It's more about at least beating winning teams or teams going to bowl games. Do you think that Texas has the depth of wins that Oregon does?
That'd be a good question. I'd have to look
What,
more in depth.
what's your order of Texas wins?
Okay, Texas wins. Number 1, obviously Alabama. That's by far and away the best win. Number 2, see, this is hard because I think if Kansas had Jason Bean for 2 weeks versus Kansas State and Texas Tech, they are 10-2. I don't even think most people would disagree with that. They lost to Kansas State by 1 score with a third-string quarterback making his first start.
Yep.
And they lost to Texas Tech by 1 score with the guy getting implemented in and having to play 3 quarters. So if you want to put Kansas or Kansas State, I think that's our second win, and people are going to laugh. Just because of the name brand, put Kansas State. That's literally why I'm going to say that.
K-State number 2.
I'll go Kansas number 3.
Okay.
Number 4, I would probably go Iowa State.
Okay.
Let's see here. After that, honestly,
then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Does anybody else even have a winning record or a bowl team? Like Texas Tech's a bowl team, I guess.
Yeah. And then, well, you'd have to put Wyoming above them because they beat them.
Okay. So, Wyoming.
Texas Tech.
Then we'll throw Texas Tech. Okay. There are 6 significant wins to a certain degree. Then Oregon, their best win is
Utah.
It's actually Arizona.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
Arizona's 9-3. Utah's 8-4. Oregon State's 8-4. And then, unless I'm missing someone, USC 7-5. Texas Tech 6-6.
Oh, and there's another thing too. We have a common opponent. I wonder who won that game by more.
Yeah, it's close though. It's close.
It's close, but again,
I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, yeah, and again, I don't know if you heard me about 10 minutes before I started taking calls. I watched Oregon and Texas Tech. That was a really close game.
It came down to a turnover too. That's what it came down to.
Oregon intercepted a pass in the end zone that they had to take the review to figure out whether he kept his foot in bounds, and then they kicked the game-winning field goal. Otherwise, Texas Tech wins the game. So, yeah, I got to say I'm a little surprised of what I'm looking at versus what I expected to see, because Bama 11-1, Kansas State 8-4, Kansas 8-4, Iowa State 7-5, Wyoming, I believe 8-4, Texas Tech 6-6. Seems to be a little bit better and certainly at the top and more quality than Arizona 9-3, Utah and Oregon State 8-4, USC 7-5, Texas Tech 6-6, and certainly with a better, showing against Texas Tech. And then if we compare the losses, though, Oregon's got it there.
Yeah. But again, you shouldn't, to me, losses are tiebreakers. Losses are, okay, everything's even, go to your losses.
I still lost the tiebreaker.
To me, you play to win the game.
Yeah.
That's why you play.
As an Ohio State fan, I wish that would have been the case a few times.
But that's just my opinion on that. I don't think I thought they should be ranked below Ohio State and Alabama too. Like, I don't think they should be ranked 5. I really hope Washington beats the shit out of them, honestly, now.
So what's your top 8?
Top 8, I honestly would just have Oregon 8 and move everyone else up. I don't have any issue with anything else.
Gotcha. Oregon 8, and you move everyone else up. Okay. Texas at 6, and then your path to. Then you've got a difficult path to get to the the playoff if Washington wins.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a difficult path anyways, just because no matter at this point, the big Pac-12 winner is getting in the playoff. Like, that's going to happen, even if it is Oregon. I mean, that they made that very clear tonight. Jeff is saying Oregon today is ridiculous. No, it's not. I just gave you examples. If you can give examples to why, I'd be interested to hear that. You're just going to say they beat bad teams by a shit ton of points. That's what you're going to say. And to me, that's not good enough. You got to schedule better opponents. We have a common opponent. We beat them by more. We have a better win. By the way, the best win in college football. I don't think it's relatively close. I know Ohio State and Michigan, obviously in that discussion, but we played Alabama on the road. There are, I believe, only 2 losses since 2019. Us and LSU won the national championship. So I don't think that's close. I don't know why people debate that.
I think it's debatable.
Michigan at home versus Ohio State or Texas. I just disagree with that.
I think it's more about the margin of the win, because Ohio State had the ball and could have, they were 30, 35 yards away from the end zone to win the game, versus Texas winning by 2 scores and taking the lead, early in the fourth quarter and winning by 2 scores. So that's where I think it's more the separation of the Alabama win being better, more so than it being that Alabama's better than Ohio State.
Oh, no, I think, honestly, if Ohio State and Bama played on a neutral field, it'd be a damn good game. But that's my point, is we played them on the road. Michigan won at home. That's the difference to me. If we would have played them at home, I wouldn't be saying that. I think Michigan would have the better win, because I think Ohio State's slightly better than Alabama.
So this is what we would like to take advantage of right here. So we got Joe Long. See, these people, Joe, you've been watching a long time. We appreciate you being here. This is where you need to step up, and you need to either call tonight, or you give Matthew a call tomorrow night on the Bleeding Burnt Orange show. That's going to be right here at 7:30 Eastern time tomorrow night. And you give Matthew a call, and then you can prove that Matthew knows zip.
Well, and the thing is, too, you can say I know zip, but provide facts. I think I've given all facts, other than if you want to debate the best win. I've given you strength of record and schedule goes in Texas. Every metric will tell you that, versus Oregon. So, again, if you want to debate that, the stats aren't on your side. The only thing that's on your side is you beat worse teams by more points. That's the thing. And the last caller was talking about the Big 12 is not horrendous. That is a fallacy. Big 12 is an average conference that's very deep. That's what they are. But the last caller said something about the more talented team wins. Okay, so again, you've talked about this for a long time, and I know you and I agree on that. Why don't we just at the beginning of the season have the 4 best teams in Vegas power rated play in the playoff? Why don't we just do that?
Yeah, exactly. We could cut to the chase, and we could just do a playoff in January, having not seen any of these teams play, and just let them show up. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I just don't understand these things. Like, arguing head-to-head matchups should not be argued. The only way, you brought up a point yesterday, and he was a Texas fan, and I disagreed with him. You brought up the point, well, what if Texas beat Alabama like they did, but then Alabama played Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Oregon, and destroyed them, beat them by 30. And then Texas played like some of the worst teams in college football and beat them by 1. Obviously, I'm going to say Alabama's the better team at that point. But that isn't what's happening. I've seen Alabama struggle with USF, and people say, oh, but that was with the backup quarterback. We beat a top 25 Kansas State team with a backup quarterback. So, I mean, these debates don't make any sense, because there's no logical answers when I hear them. That's the issue I have.
Yeah, and obviously I didn't believe what I was saying. I was just trying to move that guy off of, really stood on head-to-head, because he said that is it. And so I just wanted to give him the most egregious example of, do you truly believe head-to-head regardless of anything? That's all I was. I wasn't trying to make him look silly. Wasn't trying to disprove him. I just wanted to see if he truly was standing on head-to-head regardless of anything.
No, and then again, Jeff Dunn said you're a different team at the beginning than the end. 100% agreed. But so you just throw away the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season?
Yeah. At what point do you become a different team?
Exactly. Thank you.
How do we make this determination?
They're just dumb. They really are. They don't make any sense. They just think logically. That's all I'm asking. If you think logically, then you'll have it.
In 2016, a lot of people thought by the end of the season that USC should be in the playoffs because they won 9 straight games. But you know what? They lost 3 games. So they can't. You have to give evaluation to the entire season. Otherwise, you know what? Instead of having win-loss records, you know what you would do? You would weight the games and say, okay, the last game is worth a full point. The second to last game is worth 11/12 of a point. Then and you would just weight the games and say, They weight more heavily at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make any sense. I do agree. I don't disagree with that. That teams tend to, especially really good coach teams like Alabama, Oregon, other teams like that, tend to get better throughout the year. But I also think it's crazy because I've heard this thrown out that Alabama right now would be favored by 10 points over Texas on a neutral field. When I don't care how long ago it was, we beat them by 10 points on their home field. So I don't think there's a 21-point spread there. I don't think that's changed by 21 points. Do I think they'd be favored? Yes. Do I think they could probably beat us? Yes. Do I think they would kill us? Absolutely not. I think it'd be a field goal game, honestly, at this point. But
well, Alabama's not killing anyone.
That too. They don't. And that's
no
the thing
one.
No, they haven't killed anyone the whole season. So that's the thing too. I don't understand that debate. Again, if they kill Georgia, which isn't going to happen, then you got me. You got me. If you want to put them in over us after they just destroyed Georgia, who I think is the top 2 team in the country, I wouldn't even have an issue with that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they could win, but I think it's going to be close. And honestly, after these rankings and what I heard Steve Sarkisian say today, I think we're going to absolute kick the shit out of
Oklahoma State.
Yeah, Oklahoma State. Texas guy is a good talker and biased towards his team. Most people have these rankings. Funny coming from an Oregon State fan who I've heard on here. Yes, we're all biased towards our team a little bit.
Yes. Thank you. We're all biased.
I would say I'm compared to most Texas fans, though, I'm pretty easygoing. I call out Texas, but this, to me, it just doesn't make any logical sense. I'm not even saying, by the way, if we beat Oklahoma State and all the teams win in front of us, I have no issue with it not being a playoff. Like, 100% agree with that. People have been talking about, well, Florida State doesn't have Jordan Travis studded. I don't care. They went undefeated in a Power 5 conference. They're in the college football playoff. And to debate that is a joke to me. So, I don't understand it.
Yeah. I hear you on that.
But if you want to talk the Oklahoma State game, we can do that, Mark, because I know that's why I did come on originally.
Yeah, let's talk some Oklahoma State real quick.
Okay.
Unfortunately, you can't make I was trying to put together a Big 12 championship live preview, which we have on Wednesday at 2:00 Eastern time, everyone. So we will do it there. So does anything about Oklahoma State scare you at all?
I mean, Ollie Gordon scares the crap out of me. The guy's the leading rusher in the country, second in touchdowns behind Blake Corum. He's got, I think, 22 total or 21 total touchdowns. 22 is what Blake Corum's got. So he scares me. The problem is it's just a bad matchup for Oklahoma State. Texas is top 5 in the country in rushing defense. According to Pro Football Focus, we have the number 1 and number 2 defensive tackle ranked in the country in Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So it's one of those things where it's a bad matchup for Oklahoma State. It really is. Like, Alan Bowman is completing 59.9% of his passes. So if Texas is able to shut down the run like they have versus everyone else, including Alabama, I don't see a path for Oklahoma State to win the game. I really don't.
You know that you're in a no-win situation to a certain extent. If Texas wins a relatively competitive game, then they're not going to get any credit for that. If they win in a blowout, that's going to be impressive to some. I don't know how the committee's going to look at that. But a lot of people are going to dismiss it as Oklahoma State sucks.
No, I mean, now that you brought that up, that is exactly what's going to happen. Because I do agree. I don't think Oklahoma State's a great team, but I think they're somewhere in between. Like, if you lined up, they played everyone, they probably end up being ranked between the 23rd and 32nd best team in college football, somewhere in between there off the top of my head. So I don't know. It's interesting. We should, and I think we are going to kill them, Mark. I think we're going to beat them probably between 16 and 24 points. It's a bad matchup. I know people were bringing up who would I like to play in the post-game show, and what would have helped Texas the most, obviously, is playing Oklahoma again, because then when you get the revenge against the loss, you get the big name factor. And also, I think matchup-wise, Oklahoma matches up a little bit better versus Texas, not a lot better. I think Kansas State was the worst matchup for Texas going forward. I think Oklahoma State was the easiest. I thought Oklahoma was in between the two. But, yeah, it's just it's a no-win situation, and it sucks it's going to, I'm already preparing myself. We're probably going to be 12-1, and we're probably going to be end up being the 5th ranked team in the country and being left out of the playoff. And we'll have to wait till next year. I'm already looking at that schedule for next year, Mark. It's going to be interesting, but right now we'll focus on this game because it is the biggest game that Texas has played since 2009. It is.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't see how we avoid some level of chaos. And I was trying to determine in my mind while you were saying all that, what is the best look for Texas? Because I don't know that going out there winning 42-7 is the best look, because something in that game has to make Oklahoma State look legitimate. I almost think that if Texas wins the game, is decidedly the best team, controls the game, dominates a large portion of it, but Oklahoma State doesn't look incompetent, like it's 35-17, that might be the best result that Texas can hope for.
We're almost reading each other's minds, because the score I was thinking of was 38-21. That was the exact score I was thinking of, like right there. That's like the sweet spot of 14 to 17 points. You want them to stick in the game, maybe be like halftime, it's 20-10, and then you pull away in the second half. I think that's a sweet spot. I honestly think if Florida State does lose, we'll get in. I don't see, unless Alabama just kills Georgia, I still think we'll be ranked ahead of them. Then it does come down to that point, and I said this a couple weeks ago, and is there a chance Georgia still gets in over? I guess not, because they do recognize head-to-head. So I don't know what they would do at that point. It'd probably become Alabama versus Texas, and I think we would be in still over Alabama, but I'm not 100% sure. For Texas fans to feel safe, they want Alabama to lose and Florida State to lose. If that happens, we're in the playoff.
The only way any of us can foresee Alabama winning is in a really close game. So let's say Alabama wins 31-28 and Texas wins in the range that you're expecting. Do you think that's still going to be enough?
It would be the hardest. It would be the hardest decision this committee's ever made.
Yeah.
It would. I don't know. Again, as a logical person thinking, okay, we beat them. I think the strength of schedule, there's this in record, there's a slightly better. So I think it's straight down the middle, even at that point. I don't know. I think I would have an issue with it because we did play them and beat them, but I could understand it. And again, this is where I talk about, I think I'm a pretty logical fan when it comes to Texas. I could understand it. Would I still be angry? Of course I would, but I could understand it. But I don't know. You're asking me something I think.
Well, I don't either.
No, I know. I think that's a coin flip. I think it's we're tails, their heads, flip a coin. Whoever it lands on, that's who it is.
I don't think we've got an example. Landon brought up Ohio State, Penn State, but that doesn't match because Ohio State had a better record. We have not had an example of two teams battling for a spot that played in the regular season where the committee opted for the team that lost the game to get in. We would, not to cut you off, Matthew, but we would be in the same situation if there was no Pac-12 championship game and everyone thinks Oregon's better than Washington. They're a 9-point favorite in this game and they've played so much better football. But right now, Washington won the game. So they would be ranked ahead, of course, and have to go to a playoff. But
that's also why I think Oregon is ranked so high, is because the committee just thinks they're going to beat Washington and thinks they're a better team than Washington. I've seen that pointed out. That's the only thing that logically makes sense to me as to why they're ranked number 5, because you watch the game and think, man, on a neutral field, they're still better. Let's put them this high. And I just disagree with that line of thinking. But that's the only way, in my opinion, that you can rank them that high.
Okay, Matthew, appreciate you being here. Want to remind everyone that Bleeding Burnt Orange is every Wednesday night. It's at 7:30 Eastern time right here. So please be here. It's a good show. Matthew knows his stuff. And if you don't think he knows his stuff, you know what? Give him a call.
Yeah. And by the way, if you don't, like I said, give me a call, drop it in a comment, preferably a super chat, rant, rave, point out statistics, show that I don't know what I'm talking about. But don't be just, brain dead and type in, I don't know zip. Send me something that proves I don't know zip. If you can do that, maybe I don't know zip. But yeah, join me tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll break down the Oklahoma State game more in depth. What I think the final score will end up being and the path to victory for both teams.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, no problem, Mark. Thank you.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got Dr. C on the line. Dr. C, what's going on? Dr. C, hello.
Hey, what's going on, Mark? How are you doing tonight?
Doing just fine. How are you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Doing great. Yeah, so I agree with I agree 100% with what the last caller was talking about. He's 100% right. Although I do think Alabama's a better football team right now than Texas, I think all it's being said, the head-to-head has to count. And I know there are situations where maybe that can, that could change. Let's say if Texas, Alabama just destroyed everyone in the SEC and Texas just continued to win by field goals. Yeah. That could be an argument, but I think the way the season has played out and all things being said, and I do think Alabama is probably 3 or 4th best team in the country. I would put number 1 Georgia, 2 Michigan, 3 Alabama, and 4 Ohio State.
Okay, let me clarify something here. So is that what you believe are the 4 best teams in the country, or do you believe the rankings? That's what the rankings should be.
That's what I believe are the 4 best teams in the country.
Yeah.
However,
what is it again? Georgia, Michigan.
Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, and then I put Ohio State at 4.
Yeah, so you and I are right there.
Yeah, I don't. Florida State, I think, unfortunately, losing that quarterback, I think they dropped a notch, a huge. You lose a quarter. Who wouldn't be hurt with losing their starting quarterback? I don't like Washington. I don't think I think they're a very good football team, but I think they're just slightly outside the playoff 4 teams out of the 4. And that's, maybe being a little harsh, but I think they're right outside. I do think Oregon will beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship. So that may, that's going to play a role, obviously. Alabama has a chance against Georgia, but I do believe Georgia will win. So I think when it's all said and done, Georgia 1, Michigan 2. What would that do then? Oregon 3, Florida State 4.
Yeah, based on what you just outlined, that's what it would be. That's what I think it's most likely going to be. I expect Michigan's going to win the Big Ten, Georgia's going to win, Florida State's going to win, and then whomever wins the Pac-12 is going to be that 3 seed.
The only other scenario I see happening is if everything happens right there and Texas just beats, I don't know. If Texas wins 50-3, could they take that 4th spot over? I just don't see it. I think that 12-0, even if Florida State, without their starting quarterback, I think that 0 plays big into the how can you take that away from them, right?
Yes. I don't want
see
that taken away from them. I do not want that taken away from them, but I do think that the Oregon, Texas, Alabama, so we have limited, for some reason, everyone seems to be thinking that this is a comparison between Texas and Alabama. I get that because they played, but that Oregon is just automatically in. I don't understand why. Why would it not be? If I'm in the committee room and they are all conference champions at 12-1, I am lining up Texas, Alabama, and Oregon, and I'm comparing those 3 teams. I don't know why there's this gift given to Oregon if they win the Pac-12, and then the other 2 have to be compared against each other.
The only reason I see that is because Oregon's going to beat the number 3 team, right? And if you're saying that Washington's 3,
well, Alabama's going to beat the number 1 team.
Well, I mean, if Alabama beats Georgia,
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm
I'm
talking
just
about. I'm
thinking,
talking about if it's
yeah,
Alabama, Texas, and Oregon, there seems to be some pass given to Oregon, and that for some reason Texas and Alabama need to be compared against each other. They all need to
yeah,
be compared to each other.
absolutely. I think Texas is a better team than Oregon. I mean, think about this. We see that they both played Texas Tech, and we saw how that went, right? Texas crushed Tech, and Oregon beat them by like a field goal or a touchdown. Um,
We've
and
also
I don't
seen
see
Texas struggle against other teams.
they did, but I just do not see Oregon going into Alabama and beating Alabama. Um, I
Yeah,
think Alabama improved greatly after that
yeah.
game. It woke them up if from then on, and they were playing at times. They were probably the second best team in the country, um, behind Georgia or Michigan, depending on what week we're looking at. Uh, yeah, so I see this going on with Georgia 1, Michigan 2. Um, what did we say? Florida State 3, Oregon because they beat Washington 3 would get the nod over. It's going to go down to Texas. Well, could Ohio State have a say because they're at 6? No, you can't. You
I
can't.
would feel better about Ohio State right now if they were 5, which that's where they should be,
Hmm.
in my estimation.
I
But
agree with
beyond
you.
that, yeah, Ohio State needs Georgia to win, Florida State to lose, Texas to lose. And yeah, that should, what would we have? Michigan, Georgia, and the Pac 12 winner, and Ohio State.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Ohio State is a better team than Oregon, and they played, I think, a better schedule. They passed everything with flying colors, except they lost to the number 2 team with, on the last play, basically. Um, which could be said, Oregon with the number 3. So yeah, I mean, if Michigan's 2, shouldn't Ohio State be 5? If Washington's 3, you see what I'm saying?
Well, you are just looking at one game, though. You're not
Yeah.
looking at the entire schedule.
Yeah, and I mean, Oregon did look good, but they also played some of those games were pretty awful. Arizona State and whatnot. Yeah, so it really comes down to I really do think Ohio State got punished.
Yeah.
Um, but then again, yeah, I mean Alabama, if they beat Georgia, they'll be 4, right?
Since Ohio State was elevated to number 1 in the first rankings, and then I think they were in the second rankings, basically, they lost this game to Michigan. They beat Penn State, who's number 10, and they killed everybody else. And this is what's happened to them.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
no,
other thing
this
is, I would say that Ohio State has not struggled against a mediocre team like Oregon did against Texas Tech.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm with you. I think Ohio State is a better team than Oregon. Oregon's a good team, so is Washington, but I think both of them are right outside that Elite Four to be in the playoff. But Ohio State is the one team. I think Ohio State's better than Florida State right now. I think they're better than Washington, better than Oregon. I think you can pretty much, between Ohio State, Texas, and Alabama, it's really, musical chairs between those 3. Um, so yeah, I think it plays out well as far as, you get a Pac-12 team in, you get a Big Ten team, an SEC, and an ACC team, right? So it's good for TV. Um,
Our
and
guy,
they,
let me just say this. Ram Spencer is making a lot of pro Oregon comments in the chat, and obviously
Mhm.
Oregon's an exceptional football team. What's fortunate, Ram, is that it doesn't matter. Like Ohio State needs an angle. Other teams need an angle. Texas may need an angle. Oregon, if they lose the Pac-12 championship game, they're done. If they win, they should be in. So you don't. It's going to pretty much play out for Oregon. It should, unless there's maybe a decision to be made between Oregon, Texas, and Alabama for the final spot, with Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State having the other three. So it could get a bit dicey there. Everyone's assuming the Pac-12 champions in. And I understand that assumption because Oregon's playing the best team out of those three. Well, they're playing a better team than Oklahoma State in Washington, and then Alabama's 3 spots now below them. So I understand the assumption that the Pac-12 winner is going to be in the playoff, but if Oregon wins a close game and Bama wins and Texas wins, I don't know. I think there should be a comparison between those 3 teams.
Absolutely. But I really think that if Oregon wins, they're in, because they'll be beating a 12-0 team as opposed to Texas. Yeah. Even if they go 50-3, they're playing Oklahoma State, you know?
Yeah. It
and
is
unfortunately,
really
perception
that's really tough
matters.
on Texas here. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's all, Mark. But hey, just quickly before I leave, I never thought I'd be able to say this, but the Bobby Petrino Motorcycle Club is returning to Fayetteville.
I know. I saw that.
I never thought until today that this was ever going to be possible after the way that he left, or what led to his leaving.
Like, they don't have anyone else to turn to. And I'm not saying that he can't run an offense. It's just, there are 130 some schools playing football. Like, just that is crazy that they would make that decision. I got to think not everyone was on board with that. I got to think that there were some votes in the room that said, really? There's not another capable offensive coordinator we can go get? Do we really want to take on this?
And, I'm a fan of Petrino, after, 2011 and the way that he had that team, and he's a great play caller, and I think he still has some great play calling in him. And, but I don't know. How do you, after what happened, how do you let him back in the state,
Yeah, I agree. I am with you. All right, Dr. C.
All right. Hey, thanks for your call. No, that's it. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. There you see the rankings up there. Let's dive into it with Nick.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
I got you. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am doing just fine. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, so I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller, Michigan fan. I just wanted to – I had a little comment before my question, but I'm actually okay with Michigan being ranked number 2. In Michigan Twitter, in the Twitter world, some people are pretty upset about them not being number 1, thinking that the win over Ohio State should propel them, especially considering they didn't have Jim on the sidelines. I don't know if I completely agree with that. I wouldn't say I disagree with it either, but I think at the end of the day, as long as you're being ranked, as long as you're winning out, you're winning the Big Ten championship, and you're putting yourself in a position to be in the playoff. I think this year is kind of interesting, at least compared to maybe last year, where the difference in the 4 teams that are expected to be in the, let's say the difference between the 6 or 7 teams that we've all been talking about tonight. The difference between those teams, I think, is a lot smaller than it has been in other years. And so I think at the end of the day, any of these teams are going to have to beat 2 really good football teams. So I'm okay with Michigan being ranked number 2. I know there is some advantage with the seeding. So, like, take example Florida State, not to pick on them, but with the quarterback situation, they might be viewed as kind of the weak link, I guess. And so there could be an advantage in the seeding. But, it's still a good team. I admittedly haven't watched a lot of Florida State. I've just done a lot of reading. But it sounds like they're a pretty sound football team outside of the quarterback, and so maybe that's why the committee is still giving them a lot of respect. So it sounds like no matter what happens, they're going to have to face two really good teams. They're going to have to beat two really good teams to win the title. So I'm actually not as against where they seed, as opposed to, really just I want them to be seeded. So as long as they're there, I'm okay. And my question for you was, I actually agree that I think Ohio State is deserving of, well, I think they should be given more credit. I think 6 is a little bit too low, like 5 would make more sense. So I guess this is a two-parter, but do you think that both wins over Penn State for Michigan and Ohio State, do you think the committee, even though they ranked Penn State 10, it doesn't view those as impressive wins, or is it really? Am I thinking too narrowly, and they're looking at the season in its totality?
Well, I do believe that the committee better be, if they're doing their jobs correctly and they're competent what they do and they don't have an agenda, are ranking all these teams exactly where they believe they should be ranked, and not looking forward to saying, okay, we need to rank some more teams at this position to puff up this, the look for this particular team, or to weight them down. If they're doing that, then the whole thing's a farce. I believe that they've got, and I don't see any evidence, not that I agree with all their rankings, because I don't, but I don't see any evidence of them making egregious errors and decisions. So I have no reason for them to believe that they don't believe that Penn State's the 10th best football team in America. Michigan in particular, outside of the wins against Ohio State and Penn State, Ohio State somewhat has the same schedule as Michigan. They played everyone, of course, in the Big Ten Eastern Division. They played 2 of the same teams in the West. Now, Ohio State played a somewhat better team in Wisconsin versus Michigan's Nebraska, and then they've got the Notre Dame game. So they've got a decidedly better schedule, not a ton better. So you got to understand that I don't think that they're giving the depth of the Ohio State and Michigan schedules much credit.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with everything you said there. And on Ohio State and Michigan, let's say there is havoc this weekend and Ohio State does find themselves in the playoff. Michigan beats Iowa, they find themselves in the playoff. At some point, I think it would probably be unlikely that they would seed Michigan and Ohio State together. Maybe they would. I just don't know if they would do that. But whether they play each other in the first round or for the championship, what do you think? Do you think that narrative, maybe for the national championship it would, but let's say for the semi-playoff, the narrative would be pushed just as hard for that game, for that matchup, with the return of Jim Harbaugh? I know he's coming back for the conference game, but this would be the return to the rivalry with Ryan Day for Jim Harbaugh. How Ryan Day responds to the close loss. What do you think like the narrative would be, and do you think like that this game would be as hyped as the one we just experienced last week?
Well, it's difficult to surpass the hype that we experienced last week.
That's true.
When you take the rivalry that is considered by many, not everyone, but by many, to not only be the biggest in college football, but the biggest period, and then you match up 2 11-0 teams, and then you've got this controversy of this scandal, and you've got 3 consecutive now seasons in which Ryan Day has lost to Michigan. Like, I don't know how a regular season game gets any bigger than that. It was the most watched game in college football. Well, it's the most watched college football game almost every year, even when it's not some colossal top 5 matchup, because people just watch the game, even when they're 7-3 and 7-3, or 8-3 and 8-3. But yeah, there would be an even bigger buildup, because there's a chance that Ohio State's going to make the playoff, just like they did last year after losing this game, versus this being a playoff matchup. And so there's a certain portion of the population that's going to be watching the playoffs just because they're the playoffs. And sure, I think there is more of a build-up.
How would you feel as an Ohio State fan in a rematch like that? Because I say as a Michigan fan, I can't point it to what it is exactly. Maybe it's Jim Harbaugh's or struggles in the postseason. Maybe it's the psychological edge, even though some people would say Michigan has that psychological edge and Ryan Day is quote unquote broke. I don't know. I just something tells me that I think Ohio State in the revenge angle that I don't know. I think that would scare me as a Michigan fan. And I wouldn't feel good going into that game. What about you?
Well, regardless of what people want to say about Ryan Day, the performances of his team in the postseason has been strong. 2019, they played Clemson. It's a classic game. Some would say that they got every call in the book against them in that game. And they lost a game in which they were at the 25-yard line and Justin Fields had a miscommunication with Chris Olave and threw the ball the wrong way and they get a pick off. But they played Clemson, as close as you can play. So the Alabama championship game, well, I'm skipping. Then they get the rematch against Clemson the next year. They blow them out by 3 scores. They play an Alabama team that's just otherworldly. So that's their one down moment in the national championship game, getting blown out. But it didn't get out of hand until the fourth quarter. So they did take it to like a 2-score game into the fourth quarter. Anyway, the Rose Bowl games that they've won, the Georgia game, of course, last year. So he's been able to get his team to perform well in the postseason. Michigan, not so much. But yes, I think there's a enormous psychological advantage on Michigan's side. I think Ryan Day, this is all just conjecture, that the last team he wants to see in a playoff game is Michigan. He'd rather play anybody else. Maybe not Georgia, but considering what they did against Georgia last year, I don't think he would be afraid of Georgia. And maybe those players would have confidence saying, we played this team last year. We can do it. But to see that uniform again and it being directly after, there's no games in between. But maybe different setting, neutral field, NFL stadium, no weather. Maybe that would work in Ohio State's advantage. I don't know. I do know that Michigan's got a psychological advantage over Ohio State, just like the Buckeyes did, even more so than the Buckeyes did a few years ago, because even though it seemed like a psychological advantage, all those Ohio State teams, other than maybe 2016, they were all better. So they were winning games they were supposed to win. They were decidedly better for all those years. Now we've got 2 teams that, if you look at the record and the results and everything, they're pretty much dead even, and Michigan wins the games. So it seems like a psychological advantage now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think Ryan Day would rather face the team that he only lost to on a last-second field goal last season than, losing at, I don't know, what was it, the 45-yard line that when Kyle McCord threw that pick to Rod Moore. So, I mean, it's close, but there is definitely a psychological angle. Plus, he's not going to, I'm guessing he's not going to be getting the flack for the Georgia game like he's going to get for the Ohio State game. I think that's fair to say. My last thing I just wanted to kind of make a comment real quick, and then I'll wrap it up, is I don't know if you saw, but Caden McNamara did an interview, I think just like the last couple of days, and he made a comment about the Big Ten championship and playing Michigan and saying he's going to prep his guys the best he can. He knows that team is what he called Michigan. He said he knows what they do, like how they operate and things like that. And it could just be more of hyperbolic language from him just to show support for his team, his current team. But I've seen this in the NFL too, especially with like coaches, when one coach goes from one staff to another staff, where I think there's sometimes this misconception that, a player or a coach is going to transfer teams, switch teams, and then bring some sort of insider knowledge to that team. And I think if we've learned, we've learned a million things from the sign stealing scandal, but one thing for sure we've learned is that things change week to week, things change year to year. And I think there's nothing that Cade McNamara could supply Iowa or a rival coach could supply. Let's say like when Greg Madison went from Michigan to Ohio State. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that those two individuals could do for their current teams that the film room isn't going to do, that the analytics aren't going to do for them. So I think sometimes that gets overplayed. I see it more in the media than the players and the coaches. This is, in fact, I think the first time I think I can recollect that a player has said, I know what this team does, I know what they're about, and so I'm going to tell the team, I'm going to kind of let them in on those secrets. I just think it gets overblown by the media, who tends to do that more often, and it's just kind of silly to me. I think football is a little bit, it's more complex than that, but at the same time, it's easier than that too. The eye in the sky doesn't lie. So there's no calls or formations or something like that Cade McNamara could kind of make the Iowa defensive staff privy to that the film room hasn't already seen. Do you get my point?
Yeah, I get your point. I agree. I would say that I would think that there is some value with a smart player like Cade McNamara, maybe confirming some things that they see on tape, and having it certainly would not hurt to have that conversation to get his perspective and his thoughts, not just about what they run, but how good are these particular players? What do they like to do? What is their weakness? What are their tendencies just as individual players? I think that's valuable.
Yeah, I suppose there is some value to that. I do push back against some people who swear, especially with coaching. I think coaching in particular, you see that a lot, and you see it in the NFL, because coaching staffs in the NFL are just constantly kind of swapping around, and I don't think it's actually as meaningful as the media says. But I could be wrong. I know there's always things going on behind the scenes, as we've also found out with sign stealing. So, but that's all I had, Mark. I'll go ahead and log off, but appreciate it. Keep up the good work, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Nick. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
All right. We got Jeff Dunn on the line. Jeff, what's going on tonight? Hello, Jeff. All right. We will remind everyone that we've got Ohio State Buckeyes Live coming up Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. That's actually our next show, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Jeff, if you want to talk to me, call back. Jeff was on the line and tried to get him on here, but he just jumped off. So again, I don't want you thinking, Jeff, that I did not take your call. There we go. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Mark.
Of course.
I wanted to say my take is different from what everybody has said, so I hope that adds to the conversation. The take that I have is that the purpose for a playoff, the reason that we have the playoff with a committee, with human beings who presumably understand the game of football rather than the BCS, is to put the best teams into the playoff as judged by the committee at the end of the season.
Okay.
And so, and I think you implicitly acknowledge that, Mark, when you say, for example, if Alabama were to beat Georgia, and if Texas were to beat Oklahoma State, and if Oregon were to beat Washington, that there would need to be an evaluation by the committee, which team gets in. And what matters, in my view, is how the games are played, how the wins are earned, and also something I think is incredibly overlooked in the process, when the wins and losses occur. It does not matter. We don't play the playoff in September. We play the playoff in December, ostensibly to have the best teams playing the best football at the end of the year earn it on the field. That's why we went to a committee playoff instead of the BCS, because the BCS had a much more rigid statistical-based model that, in the judgment of many fans, put the wrong team in as they were playing at the end of the year. So when I say, for example, Oregon is playing Washington, in my theory, Washington should not be ranked number 3, even though they are 12-0. Why? Because how they have been playing at the end of the year. If we accept as an initial premise that we're trying to put the best teams as they're playing now into the playoff, Washington clearly doesn't belong. Oregon played Washington at Seattle. They beat them every way you could beat a team except on the scoreboard. They had 7 common opponents. Washington beat on those common opponents by 9.4 points a game. Oregon beat those same common opponents throughout the season by 27 points, an 18-point differential over 7 games, not one, over an entire season. Oregon has been obliterating teams in the month of November versus Washington, which has been, let's be honest, scraping by. So my point is the committee should use and exercise judgment. When you lose matters. How you lose matters. The fact that Ohio State lost the last game of the year, although it was extraordinarily competitive, it matters that they lost the last game of the year, not a game that they dropped in September. And I agree with you. If Alabama, a much, much better team than it was 6 or 8 weeks ago when it was beaten by Texas, were to beat Georgia, and Oregon were to throttle Washington, the committee should exercise its judgment as to which is the best team, not who has the best record against a strength of schedule. This is a one-loss team with a strength of schedule of 6, and this one is a strength of schedule of 9. Therefore, you put 6 against 9. So that's my perspective on how you should make the judgment with many teams that are going to have one loss in most years, how you decide which ones get in, when they lose, and how they win late.
So, Jeff, there's nothing that I vehemently disagree with based on what you just said. Like if we could have God tell us who the 4 best teams are, then
Right.
Absolutely. There we go. We know. But those committee members, this fallacy of we are selecting the 4 best teams, well, the caveat to that, or the tagline that needs to be attached, is we're selecting the 4 best teams who we believe are the 4 best teams. Nobody knows who the 4 best teams are. That's impossible to know.
The reason that we have a committee is because we
I
have
understand
selected people who are most qualified to judge that.
Well, I don't know that those.
Well,
I don't know.
believe-
I don't
believe-
know that the committee's the best. We'll get to the committee here in a minute. We're going to run through the committee members. I don't know. I know that they're smart people. I don't know that they're the best people to judge who the 4 best teams are. If there was no bias involved or anything, you would have 4 football. If you were going to do it the way you want to do it to that nth degree, why wouldn't you have 4 football coaches or 13 football coaches evaluate these teams?
I agree. We should.
Okay.
That's exactly what I agree. I think because what do football coaches do, Mark?
I think we have like 3 out of 13.
Right. They spend their entire career evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of teams on a day in, day out basis that they have not yet played. So I think that they are most practiced and most able to look at teams that have equivalent records against equivalent schedule and make that judgment, even more so than you and I, or certainly more so than an administrator or a journalist. So yes, I do believe that the committee should be made up of people who have incredible experience and ability in judging relative strengths and weaknesses of teams, because it's what they did as their job for 30, 40 years.
The other issue I have with your statement, that's one way to approach it, but it's very subjective, selecting the 4 best teams. In 2015, there's no question Ohio State was one of the 4 best teams. They basically rolled out an NFL team. So if they were truly selecting the 4 best teams, they would have kicked out Michigan State. They would have put Ohio State in 2015. Let's see, 16, 17, 18. I could probably point out some other years. 2018.
I can point out many years. I mean,
let me finish my statement, Jeff. 2018, Ohio State would have been in the playoff over Oklahoma. 2021, Cincinnati would not have been in the playoff. They were not one of the 4 best teams. Oh, let's go back to 2019. 2019, here's a good case example right there. LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson were all undefeated champions. Oklahoma had the best credentials of the other teams. They were the only one-loss conference champion. I sat right here, well, about 500 miles away, and people asked me, Mark, did the committee get it right? And my response was, well, if you're looking at credentials, who deserved to be selected, yes, Oklahoma's got a conference championship, and they're the only one-loss conference champion. So they are the logical choice for that 4th spot. Are they the 4th best team in the country, one of the 4 best? No, it's not even close. Alabama should be in the. Alabama lost 2 games at the wire. And
Totally agree with you.
And if you recall, they played a great LSU team, Joe Burrow and the crew, to a 46-41 game. And there's no way in the world that Alabama would have given up 7 touchdowns in the first half against LSU.
Absolutely.
So if you're going with the 4 best, Alabama should have been in the playoff at 19, Ohio State in 15, Ohio State in 18.
Agreed.
Somebody in place of Cincinnati in 21. I guess it would have been either Baylor, Ohio State, somebody. And somebody in place at TCU last year. Bama.
Right.
Again, Bama or Tennessee.
Yes, I agree. And for example, I was one of the very, very, very few people who said the year that Florida State was undefeated and was the defending national champion with the Heisman Trophy quarterback. They were undefeated and defending national champion. And I said they should not be in the playoff. Why? Because they're not the top 4 teams. They were barely beating 500 teams throughout the whole month of November. What happened when they got in the playoff? They were beaten by Oregon by 5 touchdowns. They took a coveted spot from a better TCU team that particular year because of their record. And that's just my point. If we're going to say that we want the best team to earn it on the field, we should have a committee and the wisdom of the crowds, not one person, 13 people who spend their time, their whole career evaluating football teams, deciding who those best 4 teams are, not going through, parsing through logic of who beat whom 10 weeks ago when the teams could have been totally different than they are today as the final deciding line about who gets into the playoff today in December. That's all.
So again, I think that I understand your approach, and I think it's valid. I would just want to very much vet out not just the credibility, but the objectivity of the people involved, that they wouldn't have particular biases against certain teams.
Yes, I agree. So hopefully you can find 13 extremely knowledgeable, coaches who are very good at evaluating teams that could actually have some integrity and do it by the best team, not by the team that won, particularly if they're retired.
And of course, Jeff, that's one of the reasons why you drive that number up to like 13, because it's still a manageable discussion in a boardroom.
Correct.
But it's a large enough group where no one person, group of 3, anything has too much power.
Correct.
Yes.
So that's my take on it. I mean, I want, until we go to 12 teams, which presumably in a 12-team playoff, we can get the best team among those 12. Presumably, there would never be a situation when truly the best team in the country was left out of those 12. But for 4, I think you go with best team, and I think you go with people who are the best positioned to make that determination, especially when you have many one-loss teams who have not played each other. You need to just evaluate the people who are the best qualified to do that, and evaluate who's playing the best football or the best 4 teams today, not 6 or 8 or 12 weeks ago when they may have won against a common opponent of another team, but both teams were playing on a completely different level at that time. That is much more unjust to me than just blindly looking at it and say, well, this team won by 20 and the other common opponent, they only won by 2. So therefore we should, pick the team that won by 20. It is not that cut and dry. It can be completely different depending upon when they play. And as you acknowledged in your own admission, Mark, when you say, if Alabama beats Georgia, what happens if they beat them by 17 points at the last game of the season? What happens if Texas, or other, what are the results? How do they win? How do they lose? How are they playing at the end of the year versus at other times to get those coveted 4 spots to adjudge the best team and have them earn it, the best team on the field?
The only issue, another issue that I have with this to a certain extent, when you just say to hell with the facts and the metrics and everything, just watch football, is I think we can all agree if Georgia wins, they're in. They're 13-0. They're the conference champion, blah, blah, blah. But let's say Georgia, instead of hitting the game-winning field goal against Alabama, 31-28 at the gun, where the ball hits the upright and it bounces through the uprights and it's good. Georgia wins 31-28. Instead of that happening, it bounces the other way and they lose. When the football coach say basically that results inconsequential because the performance on the field was exactly the same. So we're going to rid ourselves of what we just saw in terms of deciding win and loss, and that performance was the same. So we're basically negating a win, and we're just saying that this losing team is going to go into the playoff.
If in fact they were in all other respects even, I mean, it may have been fact that according to the football coaches who are looking at it, that irrespective of the fact that the ball doinks on the inside or the outside, one team was better because they were advantaged by certain questionable or calls or other statistics. One team had significantly more passing, rushing yardage, significantly fewer turnovers, but lost the game because of the doink. There are always going to be these kinds of judgments, but I would rather have the judgment made by people who are most qualified according to how they're doing it at the end of the year, rather than simply going by stale statistics of teams months before. I mean, and to illustrate the point, to take the example of what I'm saying to the absurdity, Mark. I mean, when in the NFL or in any other sport, when a team wins by 1 point in the playoff, what do? They advance to the next round or the championship.
Yes.
It doesn't matter that if the team that they beat by 1 point in the playoff, if they had lost to that same team 2.5 months earlier by 37 points, we say, oh no, they only beat them by 1, but 3 months ago they lost by 37. Therefore, we should advance the team, that just lost because it was only
However, based on your approach, there could be an NFL playoff game that comes down to 1 point, and the committee could say the team that lost is actually better. We watched this game, advance them.
If you're going to have the committee make the determinations after you've already set the teams in the playoff, which I am not advocating for. I'm not saying that the committee still continues to decide who advances once in the playoff. I'm saying they should decide who gets into the playoff. Then once you're into the playoff, whoever wins advances.
I'm going to take a very egregious example that I'm going to have to let you go, and you answer this one. Let's say a team 7-5 right now. They lost their first 5 games of the season. They played lights out for 7 weeks. They're one of the 4 best teams in the country. They're 7-5.
Yes.
They're going to make the playoff.
If the committee adjudges it, they beat the best team in the country, adjudged before that at the end of the year, absolutely.
All right.
If a 7-5 team were playing Georgia and they played in the championship and they outplayed them and they beat them in December and they had 5 losses in September, they should be one of the 4. They're one of the 4 best teams at the end of the year, and that's when we play the playoff, at the end of the year, not the beginning.
Well, I appreciate you calling, Jeff.
Okay, no problem.
I'm right there with you. Have a good one.
You too.
So while I disagreed with a lot of that, or I get to understand when you call me, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of points. I am just pushing back on a lot of things. I can take one side or the other. You could call up and say, Mark, which side do you want? And I'll say, you know what? You take whatever side you want. I'll take the other. And as long as it's a reasonable conversation, I can argue either side and hopefully effectively. Now, there are certain things that I believe, okay, this is the right way to do it, or this is certainly the better way, or this is the team that needs to be selected. But there are other times where it's a close call. You give me Oregon, I can argue them against Ohio State, Texas, Alabama. Give me Alabama, I can argue them. Give me Ohio State, I can argue them. Give me Texas, I can argue them. Now, but there's an order that I truly believe that they should be in, but I can argue any of those teams. Michael's here at the Voice of College Football. What's going on, Michael?
Good evening, sir. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Good. Just got done working a couple basketball games, getting ready for work here in a few minutes. Hey, I got a question though, and this was brought up in the stream and stuff like that. How do they choose these people, and why can't they just get non-athletic directors and stuff? I mean, they got a couple people who's not affiliated with universities or stuff like that. But why can't they get just like people who's not affiliated with athletics and stuff like that? Just like they did, didn't they have like Condoleezza Rice on the committee a few years ago?
You want Condoleezza Rice back on the committee?
No, not really. Is she a nice person? Exactly. 'Cause I got to meet her a few years ago at the Speedway. But I'm just
That's
asking.
very nice. How? So let me ask you this, Michael. If you don't want people connected to universities, then what people do you want to be on this committee?
Okay, Mark, this might sound inane and crazy and stupid, but do you think there might be fans who might be... All right, I'm going to stop right there from your reaction.
Are there fans? Yes, they do exist that are smart enough to be on this committee. There are certainly 13 fans in America that are smart enough and reasonable enough and logical enough to be on the committee. Yes, 13 out of about 10 million. You're probably right. That's about the number. They're going to be tough to find. My show and our channel and everything we do here, which is amazing, not because of what I do, but because of what all of you guys contribute, is a testament every day to incredible illogic and bias. Like, I can't even, like, people that tell me they're not being biased are so incredibly biased. It's beyond measure.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not trusting fans to select college football. You know, how in the world do you do that? Well, yeah, I
No. Okay. Yeah. No.
Who are these people? I would love to grill them myself.
No system's perfect, but it seemed like if you was to change the system, how would you go about doing it though? Seriously.
How would I change it? I've already changed it. It's documented. I've got it on videos and live streams and everything. Here it is. Number one, this is something that nobody seems to address, but this would be the biggest step in correcting all this. Scheduling. It's difficult to evaluate teams. So the big problem we have in college football that's unlike professional sports is we don't have enough teams playing each other. And that can't be corrected because you only play 12 games and you've got theoretically 133 teams. You really have about 65 or to 80 that you're really judging. So we have a difficulty, you know, it's not a Major League Baseball schedule where there's just so many games that to evaluate. So the first thing that needs to be done is we need to fix the scheduling. We need to make the scheduling equitable. Do you realize that Baylor has not played an out-of-conference game against a ranked team since 1997?
Yeah.
And other teams schedule those kind of games every year, or maybe sometimes two of those games. If we went right through everybody's non-conference schedules right now, we would find such a ridiculous discrepancy between, I'm trying to think who played a really tough non-conference schedule this year.
I got one for, I'll say Purdue.
I won't say Purdue. They're not a good example.
Well,
I respect what they did in non-conference play, but they didn't play anyone any good. Okay, I know what you're saying there, Michael. They played 3 legitimate opponents. You're correct, unlike everybody else. But none of those teams really prove anything.
Well, I know, but still, this
is my point. We would completely deconstruct college football. We would go to 10-team conferences because everyone would need to play everyone within a conference to legitimize that conference championship, number one. And then I would have a committee, and they wouldn't just do whatever they wanted. There would be very strict parameters to where, and I've laid all this out again on videos. I should just reconstruct these videos and throw them back out there, where everyone would play a non-conference schedule that would be a 500 composite schedule from the previous season. So in theory, everyone would play an equitable schedule. Then you would simply go by record. You would simply go by these conference champions had these records. Let's say we had a 16-team playoff, and let's say we had 6 conferences. Those 6 would automatically get in, the 6 conference champions. Then we would have 10 other spots, and they would simply go to the teams with the best record. And I actually took this through the entire college football playoff era and showed in a video. I think it was a live stream. I had the whiteboard up. I went through the whole thing and showed where I could logically determine, based on schedule and based on record, how to fairly select those 16 teams. And then obviously there are going to be ties between teams with the same record. You would go to a head-to-head, of course, and then you would go, if they didn't play against each other, you would go to a strength of schedule metric.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong with this because I am losing some brain cells through my back window here and stuff like that. But haven't I brought this up with you before in the past?
Have you brought what up in the past?
To where instead of doing and stuff like that, why don't teams stop sniffling and start doing this? And why don't they maybe like start doing like they do in the English Premier League and relegate?
Well, that's a whole different deal. I don't agree with that. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want this evaluation of, okay, Illinois had 3 good years in a row. Now we're going to raise them up to this other level, and we're going to drop Purdue down because they had 3 bad seasons. And you're messing with conferences. You're messing with who plays in conferences against whom. You're going to split rivalries. You're going to split geography. Yeah, that would be a mess.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, fair enough. But no, I was just wondering stuff like that. But I had brought it up before and stuff. I mean, I think I brought it up. I know and stuff like that, but I know I brought it up and stuff like that. But is it ever going to happen to where eventually with the 12-team playoff that they're going to actually have to start playing other Power 5 conferences, or are they going to still stick with some of the cupcakes they are now?
There's going to be less incentive to play difficult non-conference games.
And see, to me, I don't think it proves how good they are in the non-conference and stuff like that. I think they should do it to where they, just like with Purdue next year, they got like Notre Dame, they got Oregon State, and they got Indiana State, which they've had on there and stuff like that. But I think a team, yeah, you're going to go through the gauntlet of conference schedule, but don't you think it shows some good what they're going to do in the preview of what they could do against other Power 5 conference teams?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the way it should be done.
But why am I getting flack for it then? When I've been thinking like that the whole time.
You're asking me the way things should be. I'm telling you the way things are. I've already told you the way things should be. Now you're asking me about the way things are. The way things are is that Michigan doesn't need to schedule anyone outside the conference. And going forward, if they go 10-2 and maybe 9-3, they're going to the playoff. Why would they schedule anyone outside the conference? We need to take the scheduling out of the hands of the schools. Why the schools are scheduling their own games? No, they need to be given a schedule.
I agree. And with that said, I wish you can just continue this discussion, but you got other callers, and I got to clock in before the boss gets mad at me. And I don't think
right,
you want
Michael.
me to get mad at you. All right, but hey, maybe we can talk again on Friday or something, or maybe have another show about this. All right, take care. Stay warm.
Stuff.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
One of our favorites, Boiler Up, Michael Hogue. There we go. All right. So let's look at this committee. And I'm not going to have any criticisms of any of these people because I've never sat and watched a football game with any of them to know if they know anything about football. The athletic directors, you got to think that most of them, they certainly are intelligent people who understand organization and understand how to hire people and how to run a business and how to budget and all those things. And most of them, I'm guessing, played sports and maybe at a high level. But let's see, we've got Boo Corrigan, North Carolina State Athletic Director. We've got Mitch Barnhart, who's the AD at Kentucky, Chris Alt at Nevada, Mark Harlan at Utah, Chet Gladchuck at Navy, Jim Grobe, former coach, of course, at Wake Forest. He was also head coach of the Ohio Bobcats. Ward Manuel out of Michigan, athletic director. David Saylor, Miami of Ohio, athletic director. Will Shields. Will Shields played at Nebraska. Will Shields played for about 15 years in the NFL, Kansas City Chiefs. Great offensive tackle. Rod West. Don't know what he's currently doing, but he is a former Notre Dame player. So I got to think that in addition to being a former player, that he also has some successful business or position somewhere that you would think would be listed there. We also have Gene Taylor, Kansas State Athletic Director. Joe Taylor, Virginia Union Athletic Director. How Virginia Union fares in all this, I don't know. Maybe they wanted somebody just completely unattached to Power 5 or FBS football to give some perspective. Then we got Kelly Whiteside, former college football reporter for multiple outlets. Is anybody familiar with Kelly Whiteside? She may be extremely knowledgeable and competent at what she does. I don't know. I do have to say that my view of most sideline reporters isn't real healthy. So, but yeah, I don't know who she is. She could be amazing. I don't know. All right. So that is a look. Again, I don't have an issue with any one of those people in particular. And I do think that that the AD portion of this is valuable. And they, of course, spread it across the country to various conferences and make sure that there's not too much concentration in any one spot. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. That is the college football playoff rankings watch party for tonight. We've got a busy day on Wednesday. We've got Ohio State Buckeyes live at 11. We've got Florida State at 6. We've got no. Ohio State at 11. Big 12 championship game preview live at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So let's hype this one up. We got a big show ready for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Here we go. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, Big 12 fans, SEC fans, please subscribe to the channels there. Or if you're just wanting us to succeed, hear the Voice of College Football and understand that it's all connected. So let's say you're a Michigan fan and you just like the Michigan channel. That's all you watch. That's great. Appreciate that. That's all you need to watch. I don't want anyone watching anything that they don't want to watch, but understand that if the other things, unless we become the largest Michigan channel that anybody has ever seen with 2 million subscribers, it all needs to work or we will not have a Michigan channel because we will not have anything. So all the channels need to prosper. So we've got a Big 12 channel. We've got an SEC channel. They need to get to 1,000 subs. Big 12 championship preview live Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We got Andrew Miller from Hook'em Headlines, and we've got Cody Stovall from OK State. Locked On, I believe, is the outlet there. So we'll have a good time with that. So we'll be live at 11, 2, 6, and 7 on Wednesday. That's all Eastern time. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. See you on Wednesday. Neil, thank you so much for the contribution, sir. Neil with the super chat, Nevada fan, and just for you for the contribution. This unfortunately gets less use than any of our helmets, but it's still on the shelf. It's right there, right behind me. And maybe Neil sent this to me. I don't know. So we used to, have all of you send me helmets. So what happened was way back in 2016, when none of you were watching, way back in 2016, except Cheryl, 2016, I purchased 4 helmets. I thought, you know what? I used to just hit a blank wall, and not that this set is great. And Lord willing, this set is going to be demolished and thrown to the curb here in the next few months. That in 2016, I thought, well, maybe I think somebody actually suggested, Mark, why don't you put some helmets on your desk or something? So I went out and got the 4 playoff teams from 2016. Alabama, Washington, Ohio State, Clemson. And I bought those. And then I don't know that I bought too many more. And then I came up with the idea, or somebody did. I don't come up with too many ideas. So usually somebody else comes up with the ideas. Mark, you should have people send you helmets. So then I opened up a P.O. box and had people send me helmets. Now, we've not been receiving any helmets. I've not asked for any helmets, and I've shut down the P.O. box because I don't want the helmets right now. We may do that again in the future, have you guys send in helmets if you want helmets. We could use, in particular, I got to think that the most needed helmets on the set would be Iowa, Erica, Iowa, Auburn, Penn State. I guess I could make a Penn State helmet out of any of these. I'd just get some white paint, just paint the helmet. Penn State, Auburn, Iowa. Who am I missing? Mississippi State and Arkansas, TCU. But we got the Pac-12. Somebody loaded up on the Pac-12 and sent us like Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty well stocked up on the Pac-12, and there is no Pac-12 anymore. So those obviously move into the other conferences. But Neil, thank you so much for that. And I know that many of you enjoy the Pac-12 chat show. We're going to figure out what to do with that. It will cease to exist. It will cease to exist. Thanks, Erica. She heard me. It will cease to exist, the Pac-12 chat show, but we've got a Big Ten show, of course, on Monday nights, and we have a few people that would like to expand the Big Ten coverage, so we will do more of that. I know some of you love the SEC, love the Big 12 and others. Believe me, if I could duplicate myself a few times, clone myself, we would do an SEC show on a regular basis in the Big 12 and the ACC. We'll get to that hopefully at some point. Neil, thank you. You're the man, Neil. No, you're the man. All right. Colorado's got some cool helmets. Yes. I love the group of 5. Let's highlight the group of 5. We got Nevada. Or is it Nevada? Nevada. Got Air Force. I was kind of hoping to see Air Force in the New Year's 6 this year, but they've lost 4 straight. Oh yeah. I purchased this one myself. It's the Mighty Golden Flashes of Kent State. And of course, that's my school. So there you go. I saw somebody comment on social media just yesterday, I think, and I see this every couple weeks, couple months, that Mark's an Ohio State alum. And I'm not. A lot of friends that went to Ohio State. That might be it for the group. Oh, no. Air Force or Navy. We've got Navy. Sorry, Cheryl. We should get an Army helmet. But again, we don't know exactly what we're going to do with the set here. But I don't like the set. Have never liked the set. But we'll do something about it at some point. I think that's it for the group of 5. Nothing from the Sun Belt Conference. Okay. Wahoo fans sees Bama, Florida State, Oregon, Michigan, Georgia, Washington, Texas, Texas A&M. Yeah. We've got about 35 helmets. And then we stopped about a year and a half ago. All right, folks. See you on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Erica, thank you so much for your contribution. What size are the helmets? These are, and I made sure that everyone bought the same. Oh, you know what? This one's not the same. All of them are should. And no, I'm not cussing and not pronouncing my cuss word correctly. It's should is what all of them are, I thought, but somebody sent me a Rydell. Yeah, so maybe there's a couple other ones, but it looks exactly the same. So just wanted to make sure they look the same. This is what size? What size is that? It's about, it's got to be in here somewhere. I don't see a size on it. It's called a mini helmet, but there is a specific size, and that's a good question. Then again, we are not going to continue the collection right now. We may pick it up at a later date. All right. This microphone drives me nuts, and I've been using this now for a year and a half, and just across the room is the microphone that is worth a lot more than this one and had the crane and the whole deal, and I just liked it so much more. And I just bought this just as a stopgap. But you know how that happens with stopgap sometimes? You think you're going to buy something and use it for like a month or two, and it turns out to be a year and a half. But we'll fix things. We will improve the production quality at some point. Yeah, standard mini helmet. Yeah, I thought that there might be some kind of a specific size on here, but I don't see it. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. 11 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. See you then. Buckeyes Live.